Well, hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're finally getting around to rebuilding this fan shaft assembly on a 1939 John Deere A. So you can see here I've got all of the pieces laid out for rebuilding this, and this is for converting to a friction disc system. So if you watch the first part of my video, I'll see if I can add a link in the top right or in the description. The first video showed how this original 39A had the rubber mount set up that is known to get brittle, crack, and then fly itself into the radiator. So I don't want that. That's why we have this part. We are going to convert it. And I also talked about in that last video a spacer that goes onto the fan shaft in order to convert it. You have to have this spacer. There is one place to get it. Here is the part number. You can call George Persinger from Green Parts of Virginia. You know, normally I'm not a promoter or anything like that, but truly, this guy is the only place that you can get this part. Unless you find it somewhere else, he has this part, and if you need any other parts to do this, he's got it all. But he will get you this part and to convert this. So I have the order here of everything that will go onto the shaft. So we've got the spacer, and then inside the housing, once we have that spacer on, we'll shove that through, and then you've got a washer that goes in there. You've got this cork washer that we have to soak in or grease it, and that's going to sit inside this piece and go on the shaft. Then you've got an internal spring, bearing, another washer. I've got the felt washer soaking in oil. That's why it's sitting in that cap. And then the felt retainer. So that's everything that goes to the front face of this fan shaft assembly. Now, to get this spacer on, George was nice enough to provide a picture of what needs to be done. Is what you're actually going to do is I have an older bearing here, and we're going to use this center cone to tap that spacer onto the shaft, and it's going to seat back here against this lip. So I think I showed in the last video, if you look at like a newer style of fan shaft, it's a thicker diameter up until this point. So this is just to kind of make it seem like a newer fan shaft. What's unique is these fan shafts are solid on the older ones versus the newer style were hollow. So we're going to see if we can get that tapped on there, kind of like how he shows in the figure here. And then hopefully we can start assembling different pieces. Alright, so there you have it. We have the spacer on. Don't forget to lubricate the shaft with, it says 30 weight oil. So now we'll start by putting the shaft through the housing and start assembling these other pieces in. Okay, so quite simply, we're going to go from big to small. So, let's see here. I quit getting messed up here. So this is how it all goes together, and that's how we will slide it on. So you got your bigger part, your rollers, and I will want to grab a bunch of grease here. Grease that up. So I apologize, I haven't had a video in a while. life kind of took over. We had first cutting hay. We had a 3-week drought here, which, you know, in time of hay, that means you're doing hay constantly. So we got first cutting hay done, quickest we ever did. And then I had another baby. I had a daughter a couple weeks ago. So between those two things, I really haven't had much time to work on this, unfortunately. And but here we are. So we'll get this all greased up here. Get that in there. All right, and then we've got the washer. We'll clean that up a little bit. I really wanted to have this whole tractor together by the time my daughter was born, and let's just say I fell quite a way short. That's all right. Other farm stuff took precedence, and hay, and of course I got a million other projects going on. Then there's that 4-letter word everyone talks about, work. The pay job, right? Okay, so we'll get this felt inserted in here. So that's good and oiled. That went in there easily. Don't want to tear or rip that. And then this will slide on here. And then I won't be able to do this right here. I'm going to have to stand this up, and then you tap that in there. That's a little bit of like a press fit. So then that'll finish the outside. Then we'll move on to the external. All right, now here is the order that everything needs to go on the front here. You got your pulley, you've got your outer spring, and if you get them mixed up, the spring in here is a little bit longer than this spring. Typically this one is painted. And you have your first kind of friction disc here. We've got a new pad. And then the fan, you know, these pieces are meant to be kind of pressed in there. I realize they only go in like one orientation. So you got to get a different fan, of course, because the other type was rubber mount. So you got the fan, and then the same thing kind of in reverse, the friction disc. One of these are aluminum, so just be very, very careful with them. They are easy to break. And then you've got your keepers and your collar. So I should have explained it better earlier, but here is kind of the important thing for why you have to have that spacer. I realized I put that on and I tapped it in there. So, but the kind of the snout to the fan, the collar to the pulley, not the fan, it actually goes inside that felt retainer and sits on the bearing. Okay, and then the bearing and all that, you know, sit against that spacer. So if you don't have that spacer, then that bearing in there is not sitting on anything. So when the pulley pushes on the bearing, it's just going to keep pushing it back until this fan will rub on the front of this housing. That is why you have to have the spacer, so that the pulley is sitting against the bearing and the bearing is sitting against the spacer. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and slide on the rest of these pieces. All right, now I don't have a hydraulic press, especially not a tall one. You all can put that on my Christmas list and get that for me. But so I've got carpenter clamps going to the back flange of the fan housing. So you've got your keeper, and I gotta look and see what direction this goes on. I believe like that. And then you have your 2 keys. I had 4 here, now I only have 3. There you go. just inside here. Of course, I need to squeeze that just a tad more. And there's one. There's two. And then the collar, when I start to release this, will push up on that and set against that. I forgot to mention I'm using an old bearing race here, kind of more evenly spread the load on these drive discs because these are cast aluminum and they break very, very easily. So, and voila, we have one completed fan shaft changed over to friction drive. I don't think I'll get this installed on today, but I'll talk about one more thing, and that is mating it with the governor. Alright, so this is an important detail that some may gloss over, and that is that this is a shimmed interface here. So you've got different, same gasket, different thicknesses here. So like George Persinger, I forget, he doesn't have the thicknesses here, but he's got two thin and one thick, and you can change out different combinations. But the goal here is we're gonna put this together and we're going to try different combinations, and then you got to make sure that when you bolt it together that you still have some clearance to the gears, so you can use a feeler gauge to make sure you've got clearance. And one thing to note is you'll want to make sure that this is kind of sitting straight and supported. Otherwise, of course, if the shaft is like this, it's going to show like tight down here and or open down here, tight here. So you got to play with it a little bit to make sure you're getting a good reading. But if you ever hear like a whine in the governor area, odds are this is not shimmed correctly. It's probably too thin and there's too much contact. You'll hear this as a real high-pitched whine going. You can change these gears, but note you need to change them in sets because of that. They need to be kind of worn together, so you can get these in a set, this gear and this gear here. Do not replace one gear, otherwise you'll have the same thing, a whine, because they're really just not mated to each other. So I'm going to play with these gaskets here and see if I can figure out the right combination. Okay, so I was kind of mistaken. I forgot. I don't think there's a real good way to measure. But you can see what I'm showing here is, for me, the one thick gasket was enough. I added a thin one just in case to see if it was like any easier to turn. It was not. So I just went with the one thick one. Honestly, I did not try the one thin one. But what I want to showcase here is the mating of the two gears is perfectly smooth, and I think that is kind of important. So you want to make sure it's not tight, and you want to make sure it kind of looks like they're mating, and yeah, and so that, see what works for you. One thick gasket for me. I guess I should mention, so I never took the governor apart on this. Didn't look like anything really needed attention. So I'm just kind of leaving it as is, so I won't have a video on that. If you want to know a little bit more about the governor, taking it apart, I think check out my B video. I think I talked a little bit more about that. I can't remember. Yeah, if you ever go to take this end cap off, don't forget to take your magneto off first before you put this back on. Otherwise, you can screw up the magneto. I think that's it. So there you have it, everyone. One complete fan shaft switched over to the friction drive from the rubber mount. So let me know what questions you have. Hopefully you learned something, and looking forward to getting this back on the tractor. I figure I have 4 milestones left. Get the fan shaft governor on. I gotta get the radiator on, which I've had some issues with that, but that should be coming together. Get the motor back together and the clutch. After that, it's pretty simple stuff. So this will almost complete one. So 3 to go. Catch you later.